Welcome everyone. Thanks very much for taking some time out of your day to sort of attend this release webinar. This has been a big one. We've got quite a lot packed into this, so I'm going to try and squeeze it all into an hour. But yes, some exciting new features to the product, which is hopefully going to help your workflow and get you to that end result a lot quicker. So we've got, my name's Adam. I'm part of the customer team here at Giraffe in Sydney. And we've also got the Giraffe CEO, Rob Asher, here, who's going to present and demonstrate the new enhancements in the release. So this is all going to be recorded and posted to YouTube later. So don't worry if you miss anything, we'll run through it and there'll be a recording of it. So yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Rob, and you can grab the screen. I should also just add as well, I'll be manning the chat. So any questions along the way, feel free to drop them into the chat and I'll get back to you guys.
Cool. All right. Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining. I thought the best way to do this is just use the tool to build a project. And as I build that project, I'll call out the new features as we go. And something that I've just started using heavily, and I encourage you to use as well, is spaces. So I'm in an example space here, and you can see that all my projects are named. I've also set up for myself which Giraffe features each project uses, which persona, which customer type they're targeted at, and then just some tags. And just being able to click through my projects like this, like here's an interior fit out demo, it's using Flow, it's targeted at architects, and I can even see some pictures and see it on the map and then color it by that customer segment is incredibly valuable. And the best way to use this, which I've only just started using, the American team has been using heavily, is to create projects using right click. So I'm just going to select these sites here as to do our sort of precinct plan on. I don't know anything about these sites. They're probably, are subject to some sort of rezoning at the moment, but if they are, I don't know what it is. So I'm just going to pick them randomly. And so I'm right clicking on them, and I'm going to create this project, 86 Reserve Road, and I'll just say precinct plan. And the Giraffe feature, we'll just say draw. And the sector, why don't we just go for developers? And I'll say precinct plan, mixed use. And just doing this when I create a project, or when you create a project, is starting to build a database of projects. And so that when it comes to rolling out AI or using any of the other tools that are starting to proliferate in the market, you've got a great data set of either pipeline opportunities or projects. I'm just going to hit the space bar. I would always be tapping the space bar in Giraffe, just like in Rhino or one of the other tools. A lot of the commands find their way into the space menu, this command menu, as well as the shortcuts. So we try and make it easy for you guys to discover it that way. And I'm going to be editing the project boundary because I want to cover this entire site. Now I could right click with the and merge these cadastral parcels together, but this area doesn't matter too much. All right, so there we go. So I think we've got ourselves a project now, and maybe the first thing I will do is I'll just filter out these 3D buildings. So I open the base map layer set, which ships with all versions, of Giraffe, and I'm going to draw a boundary. And then I'm going to exclude the buildings inside of that boundary, like that. And so now I've got it's the Artarmon concrete plant. At least it's been flattened, but all the rest of the context is there. Then I'll save that and clear out of that because that job's done. Okay, so to the drawing tools now. So let's start drawing. The menus at the top have been substantially changed. So substantially changed in appearance, but not really in functionality. The flows have been broken down and categorized, so we still have a lot of them. This edit tool over here, there's a whole bunch of new moves that can be made, which I'll show you. And the other thing is the content library has been upgraded. So let's go through that sort of step by step. So the first thing I'm going to do for this project is annotate a way of breaking up this site. So if I hit Shift D, I can get a dimension. So this is 121 by, roughly speaking, a 228 meter site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a street grid. All right. And the way I'm going to do that is using the flows. So I'm going to start, using the content library. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some content, some arrows, and I think that's probably maybe a view arrow. And you can see that as I click import, those things just are all dumped in the middle of the screen. And then I can move them how I want. So I'm doing this to annotate and communicate before I start the site planning what the core moves I'm going to make are. I'm going to say, let's have an entrance to the site over there and over here. And then I'll use some of our basic annotation tools. So a dashed arrow to start breaking up the site like this. Thinking like this is very much of like Giraffe, like a kind of like Adobe Illustrator, or maybe, a simple planning 2D tool. Now, when we bring something in from the content library, you'll notice that the left-hand side properties menus, or when we draw something, have been substantially changed. Now, hopefully they are more clear than they were before, because what we've done is all the property that used to sit in this properties menu hidden away have been surfaced. And there's a number of ways of looking at them. So we have a basic view and an all view. No real difference, except that in the all view, all of the properties are visible. And in the basic view, what we've tried to do is surface just the most relevant properties. They do the exact same thing that the properties used to do. So the line color property is just now got a graphic widget. But if I change it, it just looks like it just changes the line color. And if you click here on this, you can specify a bespoke color. Now, most of the time, I'm in all as a very advanced Giraffe user, where some things are different. So you can see there's some pre-programmed stroke dash array in the basic view, which if I click, you can see it has an impact on this line. Whereas in all, that is more of an advanced sort of like a Illustrator SVG style interface. So if I just go 1-1 or 1-3, I can specify the relative strokes and dashes. I won't go through all of these things in detail. Have a look at them. I hope that they're relatively straightforward to understand. Always hover on the left-hand side to understand what's going on. And probably the one thing to call out is there is on this right-hand side of the menu, on hover, a symbol, which we've struggled to figure out what the symbol should be. We've settled on this revert to default symbol, which reverts it back to the usage. And all that does is it clears that property out. So that line width I'd overridden to 3. And if I want to get rid of that property, go back to the defaults, I click that and it returns back to its default of 1. And so I can always do that with all of the properties as I change. So the upshot of this is it's much, much quicker to edit things and change colors. So the old way to change the color of this rectangle, I would have had to find the color property and add it. Whereas now I can change colors very quickly. I'm using the X key here to slice this thing up, and I'll show you slice in more detail. But you can see here I can make like a cool little park very, very quickly with some fun places to hang out just by using those properties and working with them quickly. I'm going to edit the grid. So I hit the space bar to get into the command, and I'm just going to snap this grid up. I'll do a 2-meter planning grid and snap like that. And so now what Giraffe has done, if I hit the G key or turn the grid view on and off, has aligned the map with the grid to the north. This is going to allow me to select these things and stretch my park out. Another thing that's really nice on the graphic side now is I can just reduce the line widths or increase them as well. So hopefully this is going to make it much, much easier to use the tool to do these kind of simple annotation type jobs, which people are doing all the time. I was doing all the time, and I just sort of become used to exhaustively adding line width and color and offset, etc. So that's now much more automated. And hopefully you like these default colors that we've chosen. Currently, they're not editable. I think they work quite nicely, but it's always very easy to change the color. And just to call out the other thing which we've done, which is huge for the graphic minded amongst us, is now live updates. So you can actually see what the color looks like in space. Also, to call out on this menu, labels, you can just add a label on now, or maybe I'll say these, and I'll call these, turn the label on and call them playground. Now, none of this is new. This is the same label tool. It's just surfaced now, and I can turn it on and off simply like that. So now every geometry in Giraffe automatically comes with a label kind of property set on it. You just need to turn it on. And always editable, always kind of responsive. Probably quite a few of you have not used the label properties because you've been unaware that they're hidden in the depths of Giraffe. So hopefully this will also mean that they're more widely used. And the label functionality in Giraffe is actually really deep. We've got icons and text and plain text. So have a poke around. Getting into this left-hand menu, I think it would be a reward investigation. I will, for the highly technical, just click at the bottom here. This is the JSON. So this is the what the computer is seeing on the properties menu. So this geometry here has the stroke width of 0.45 and the stroke color of that hex and this color. So you can still always call that up. And you can also look at it as GeoJSON, and this is including the geometric data. This is really useful if you have to copy paste some Giraffe information into QGIS or into some sort of other package. You can sort of see what's going on. It's also really useful if something's not working in the way you think it should, just to understand what's going on. And so then you just click back into the basic or the all view to look at the same information, but rendered in a graphical way. All right, so we've gone through the properties panel and we have created a path plan with these sort of shattered, fragmented paths that go through it. So maybe I'll highlight those paths and just show you how good this is. So you can see how big and sort of chunky this arrow is, which is now really easy to deal with because I can just grab the line width, which is set to 8, and shrink it down and get that dash down to 4 or 1. And the end arrows and the start arrows can also be changed. So everything really nice, really easy to sort of grab something and change it. And now what I'm going to show you is this stuff that I added from the content library. All of this works in the same way, with the exception of this top property group called the flow controls. And those are going to be different for every single flow, most of the things that you add from the content library. So when you add stuff from the content library, kind of read these and have a look. Hopefully the labels are relatively straightforward, but this is a little widget that makes like a little hotspot that if we zoom out, we can sort of see that we're doing, that we're calling attention to this new communal space. And so those flow controls will be unique per flow. So with the arrows, it's the tail width, the arrowhead width, and the arrowhead proportion. Always very customizable, right? Whereas with this hotspot, it's the number of kind of rays on this sun. And so a trick that I just did then, which you also may not know, I only discovered it recently myself, is if there are overlapping geometries in Giraffe, there's 2 ways to access them. One, you can come into the edit mode and turn on X-ray mode. I actually don't know where it is. Or it's maybe in the select menu. Yeah, X-ray click. So you can turn that on. But you can also just command click. Or you can use the space and toggle X-ray mode. So if I want to click on get this flow and I do this, it automatically selects this geometry. But if I hold command or control, then I can select, I get a menu of geometries for me to select. And the property that I want to lift this thing up in the Z, another set of properties. So I've gone through the appearances and the flow control ones, is this built form panel. We sort of agonized over the names of this thing. We thought 3D form. We've ended up on build form. That's essentially all the properties that make something three-dimensional in Giraffe. So levels, floor to floor, the stack order, the height, all of these sort of things. And you can see that just sort of playing with those obviously has a direct impact on these flows. So, and if you don't know, obviously, not obviously, in Giraffe, you can sort of grab and scrub parameters like that. So if you hover over them, the mouse changes. And if you just click and drag left to right, you're changing those parameters. All right, and I'll make those outlines red. Okay, so we now have some sort of, I don't know if this is an architectural element or a diagrammatic element, but it looks pretty cool. And now I'll get into H mode, which is a new drawing mode. As I go, I will say we've updated the majority of our usage colors. So hopefully you like them. If you don't, they are obviously customizable. And a few things I'll do as I draw that are really nice fixes. So you can see I'm drawing in kind of a loose fashion, which I favor, not everyone does. And to support a more precise drawing style, we've made a couple of major changes. Probably the biggest one is just the B key. So if I hit the B key, I go to the base point mode, the base point move mode. And so what I did there was I tapped B, I held S to snap, and then I completed my snap. And if I hit Shift B, I'm in base point rotate. So now I can snap this geometry to that geometry precisely. And I can repeat that operation over here and rotate it out, rotate it back, whatever I want to do to draw precisely. So now we know that those 2 points are touching exactly. And sorry, if I'm flicking between 2D and 3D, that I'm just using the T key all the time. And a general comment, obviously I've been talking about hotkeys all the time. Your left hand is Giraffe's design, so your left hand can kind of hover over Q, A, E, R, B, that sort of side of the keyboard and really help you out. Now I'm going to make this plaza. We can change the usage over there, but we can also right-click now. Our right-click menu has become far more rich. So I'm going to select the usage and change it to plaza right from there. And I can also I can group and arrange and, change the layers, do all of the stuff that I can do up there, just sort of from this pet palette, as well as do some Boolean unions, intersections, etc. But I kind of want to stay a bit in this. So let's say this 22 meters, let's say our retail consultants come back and said it should be 12 meters. So I'm going to input the 12, then I'm going to hit the minus key, and that is going to give a relative offset. So I'm going to go 12 minus, and then I'll just hit B and snap this guy along. So now I have a precisely 12 meter, I guess, colonnade, plaza, whatever we're talking about, more of an arcade. I'm going to use the Q key to add a couple of levels to this. I'm going to copy paste. And one more little thing to call out, but very nice, is, let me delete that copy paste. When I select this, it has a stack order of 0, so it's on the ground. It used to be the case when you copy pasted, you would get stack order 0 all the way. And that would mean that the stack order would become a little bit ambiguous as you went up the stack. Whereas now I copy and paste and the stack order automatically increments, which is a small quality of life improvement, but it's actually really nice. And I'll right click this and I will change it to commercial. And then I will put some resi on top and residential like this. I'll do a couple of towers. Yeah, this. Like this. And what I actually also like to do, and just a trick in case you don't know this, if you want to move these things onto a layer that doesn't exist, you can always just do it from this layer menu. So I'm just going to create a new layer called Anno for annotation and create that. Those guys go on, and then I'm just going to turn that annotation layer off because it's going to get in my way. Put this guy on annotation as well. All right. So then just making sure I've activated the default layer. All right, so now this is where this gets kind of, oh, sorry, you see the playground? This is another very, very deep property. That playground is coming through sort of popping through my 3D building. So what I can do is select those open the label, and there's a little on top parameter, which is by default set to true. And that means on top of everything. So if I turn that off, the size will change a little bit. That's right, there it is. Now they're no longer on top, so they're actually behind. There they go. So you can see the building's now hiding them. Okay, but back onto H mode. So this sort of built form that you're looking at here has been kind of the Giraffe standard, a sort of an envelope. A compound building, so it's multi-use. We're getting all the areas, we're getting the GFA, we're getting the number of dwellings. So all that sort of assumption-driven, data-driven planning is happening. But it's been very difficult to, say, drop a core through here and figure out how it intersects with this retail. And so that's why we've invented this H mode. We've implemented. It's just isolate mode. H for hide, and H is also to the left. So you can sort of keep your hotkeys there. So if I select a geometry and I tap H, you'll see the model, the rest of the model falls away, and the geometry that I selected is isolated and visible. And there's another trick that happens, is that any geometry that has the same base height as the selected geometry also gets isolated if it's touching. So I'll show you what that means. Is, say I've got a little outhouse building here. I'll put a clubhouse here in a second. So let me grab that and turn them into community. Right. If I select this guy and I hit H, I get 1, 2, and 3 because they sort of form a contiguous island. I don't get that because they're not touching. Yeah. But if I want all 4, if I select both of them, then I get the contiguous island. So I get that one because they're a contiguous island, and that one as well. It also works up the chain. So if I want both of those, I can do that and get sort of that continuous isolation. So quite a powerful sort of ready filter. It filters really quickly. And what's nice about it is it means that we can now start slicing this thing up without having to worry about what's on top of it. So let me do that. So again, I'm using the X key, and I'm just going to start slicing. So let's say that's the coals. So that's big. And then we'll do another little through run. And this can now be sliced into tenancies like that. And now I'll just use the color overrides to make them look nicer. So they all stay as retail. They still keep the usage retail, but they've just been, their color's been overridden. And if I revert to default, it goes back to that blue. But now it looks really nice, and that's reading really clearly. And maybe I'll make that like a Coles, a supermarket color. I'll just fix that up there. All right. And if I hit H now, you can see my built form. What's going on with that guy? I'll leave him. My built form looks the same, but I've actually gone inside and have built some internal planning. So now what I want to do is I want to at least get a call coming up the building. So this is still a bit tricky, but if I turn the transparency down, I can see my building over the top there. So what I'll do is I'll put a core here. And again, here's a direct input. Say my core is 12 by 4 meters. I type in 12 and then 4, and I get the exact size for the core. And I'll set that thing to core. All right. So now I'm going to hit T and H, and there'll be a bit of a mess because that core will be stacking things up. So what I'm going to do is grab those guys and actually cut him out here. So I'm using H again. So do that, and I'll bring this lobby through the front like this and hit the T. All right, so that's working nicely. Now the core has a default usage floor to floor of 3.2 meters, and the retail has a default floor to floor of 4.5. This is another one where it's really nice now with the properties menu having everything here. You can see that floor to floor is grayed out. And if I hover, it says this feature has the usage core from which it gets the floor to floor 3.2, but I can just crank that up to 4.5. So that first level of core now matches the neighbors. I'll hit H, and I'll select those guys and hit H again and chop this bit out. And ways of chopping things out, we're working on a curved Boolean tool at the moment that's going to be able to do these slicing things quite nicely. And I like copy pasting this stuff. I like keeping the core in separate pieces, and I'll show you why in a second. Sorry. All right. The reason is, you see I hit H there. That meant that because I've got the bottom core and this core on sort of separate horizontal slices of the building, I'm able to select them separately. And the commercial has a floor-to-floor of 3.8. So I'm just going to adjust my core floor-to-floor to 3.8 and then crank it up like that. All right. So now we've got this core running up through there, and we could bring this out like this. Another big improvement has been 3D snaps. So you can see as I'm drawing in 3D, I'm snapping to the various parts of the 3D in a far more convincing way. All right, and I'll now just do this and pull this guy out, and then we'll have our building. All right, so do that. And now, again, copy and paste that core. Just get this guy out so it's not stacking. And then clear the floor and run that core up the side of the building. Okay, so now we've actually got quite a detailed plan here. So if I click here, we've got a ground floor plan with some tenancies, a core, a lobby. And we've got a plan here, which is the commercial, the core running through it. Bit of a mess there, but we'll live. And then if I hit H again, we've now got the tower plan, right, with the core running through it. And by splitting that core vertically, I'm able to sort of work through those bits of the building sequentially. All right, so I won't do this one again, but what I will do is do some car parks and some talk through the updated flow algorithms because they're really cool. So they're all here. Let's start with the car park, which we've done a lot of effort on. Looks like this now, which is similar. But if I hit Shift A, which is the general Giraffe shortcut for if you're in a flow, kind of enter the edit mode. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can do. So you can select the prime edge directly. You can kill parking on an edge as well. So just override each edge. And what's really nice is if you don't like the centering that the algorithm has found, you can just pull that up. There's also a ton of parameters. And if we go back to the start of this demo, the flow controls are now the top properties kind of chapter or group. And all the parking lots are then parameters and then nested under that. And you can just see how many there are. So if you use the existing one, there's about that many, but we've added a whole bunch. So we've added islands and edge islands and max run. So if you only want 14 meters or 20 meter runs before you get a road, you can do that. You can open and close the corners. You can do all sorts of things. You can obviously also add exclusion zones. It works. There we go. So maybe I'll add an exclusion zone there. You can add no parking zones. Exclusion zones, the difference between an exclusion zone and a no parking zone is the exclusion zones like parking next to each other, whereas the no parking zones just are, will just remove the parking. I'll turn off those edge islands just to like that. There we go. And we have a special use zone as well, which will take all of the car parks within that polygon and override them with different widths. So those could be DDA, they could be EV car parks, they could be bicycle car parks, sort of whatever you want. Unfortunately, we only have one kind of special use at the minute, but yeah, that could maybe be version 4. So this is a much more powerful and fully featured solver. So have a look at it, have a play with it. It's pretty fun. And you can see there, this sort of max run is fighting with the, with the shape and the geometry. So spending time sort of tweaking the parameters is really interesting, and can get you like quite different results. All right, so that's the new car parking algorithm. So we're just doing some nice on-grade car parking here. And then I'll just quickly whip through the residential algorithm, which I don't believe has changed in terms massively. Adam, am I wrong? Oh, no, there is. There's a few major changes. Sorry. Yes. The major changes are mainly, hopefully, what you always thought it should have done rather than much new functionality. But the main thing is that the outputs now of this algorithm are usages themselves. So you can see here, this algorithm is running and it's solving a mix, just like the version 1 algorithm did. However, it's in the previous version of the algorithm, we were just outputting geometries that were quite difficult to deal with and didn't tie back to Giraffe usages. Whereas now the algorithm will output usages. So generally it will output usages that are units, like a 1, a 2, or a 3 bedroom usage. But I can get it to output amenity, king suite, core, corridor, whatever usages I have. As you can see, our new colors here are taking the world by storm. I'll just dive back into the content library just to show you a bit more of the content because I do love it. I'll get the people, and I'll get some trees. So always search as well. Get this row of trees, import that, and I'll get tree number 1. All right. And so you can see how quickly now I'm able to just sort of make stuff feel nice. I've written many, many Grasshopper scripts doing this. And so I got this content in. So there's some people now across my quite large, quite imposing development. Maybe I do need to pull it back. I don't know, do something to clean it up, but we'll do that later. But like always, the flow controls now have inputs that are bespoke to this flow. So I can increase the count, the number of people, or I can scrub them up to quite high numbers, maybe 100. And I can randomize their position and randomize their scale as well. Nice and performant. And same with the trees. So this tree is not a flow. The only kind of parameters it has are this scale parameter. And just on this, the old ways, so say I want to rotate this tree, you may or may not know that rotation is a Giraffe property, but if the property is not in the menu, if you don't see it, just add it in. All right, and I'll put a row of trees sort of wending its way through my development. One more thing, just that you hopefully are using, the Y key for eyedropper. So if I want to just grab the properties from one geometry and put them on another, I just use the Y key. All right. I think we've made quite a cool little scheme. We spent 35 minutes. I believe I've covered most of the features. I wonder if there are any questions.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, Rob. We've got Oscar asking about when you override the floor-to-floor height, is that captured in the analytics?
Great question. It should be. I believe it is. So let me show you some analytics tricks. So we'll call this tests. Create it. I'll just create a new measure, and this will be floor to floor height in meters, and we'll just look for floor to floor and return it. Save. Okay, now it's returning the sum, so it's not too useful. All right, and it's also looking at every single thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a filter in here. So I'm going to add a property called test, or create a property called test, and I'm going to set it to a number. Analytics only really likes numbers, and I'm going to hit save. And this is one way of filtering things out. So I'm going to add another component now called test, and test is equal to 1. So if I go A times B, I'll just always get 1. And ideally, this will filter these things down. But unfortunately, it doesn't. What I'm trying to do is click on this. All right, so I'm going to have to do one more thing. Different way. I could do a silly way. Let's do this. layer, new layer, test. All right, so I put that colon test, and what I'll do is I'll group by layer. Okay, so that layer is reading the floor-to-floor height as 3.8, which is the input through floor-to-floor. Now it's at 2.3, and if I clear it, it goes to 3.2, which is 3.2. So the answer is yes, it does. If it's overridden, analytics receives the overridden value, which is how Giraffe is designed. So it's similar with efficiency. So if I was in my residential and I saw my building efficiency is 80% by default, and if I changed that to, if I added efficiency over here and turn that to 15, that will be the number that flows through to analytics because it's overriding the usage.
Great. We got a couple more questions in there. One from Semi is, can you change the direction of the drive aisle with the car parking algorithm?
Can I change the direction of the drive aisle? So I'm assuming what that question means is like go from this way to that way. And that the answer is yes. So the way that the Giraffe works with that is you select, so I've selected the car park. I'm going to hit Shift A to enter this kind of edit mode. This little red key, little red triangle is going to be the offset which everything will be parallel to. So if I want the drive aisle to be parallel to this one, I select that one. Now this is not obvious what's happened is because I've got this max run length. So I'm going to turn off the max run. And now you'll see that drive aisle is this way or that way. Now, where that gets a bit complicated is you can also, you can also do it like this, like that. So any edge can act as like the prime edge and will be highlighted bright red, and that'll be the way that the drive aisle goes. There is also this, if I hit out of Shift A, you can add a special lane as well, like this. So you can also override various parts of the car park algorithm. What I would say is, as you do this, like you can see how many parameters there are, plus these kind of floating free parameters, which are these rectangles and primary like aisle directions, etc. So the best way to learn what the algorithm does is just to fiddle around with it for a bit. It is being used in anger around the world, and we know it's doing a really good job. So yeah, have a good play with it. Normally you can do what you want like very, very quickly, but sometimes you can get stuck as well. So let us know if it's not performing in the way, like please send us a picture being like, hey, what the heck? Like, circle it and say question mark so we can sort of look at that algorithm.
Yep. Oh, that's perfect. I think another useful example would just be to demonstrate the car parking count that's coming out of the flow. We've got a count that populates. Oscar's asked about that one.
Yes, okay. So the car parks here, that 187 is coming out of the car park. You're stretching my knowledge here. Where does it come out? Parking bay count. Okay. So what happens is this geometry, there's a property here called the parking bay count, which is written to this geometry. So you can grab it in analytics, but also it's written here in the urban metrics. So you can see that there's 187 bays over there, and that's what's coming from this car park. So that's actually being calculated kind of manually, if that makes sense. So it's like it's counting up each rectangle. Because the other way that you can count car parks in Giraffe, and this is confusing, is you can also just draw a rectangle. And you can see as I'm drawing this rectangle, it's going up and down. But this rectangle is just providing 2.85 car parks per 100 square meters. So it's saying, hey, we're not going to draw the lines. We're just going to assume that each car park is going to be 100 divided by 2.85, which is about 35 square meters for each car park, and we'll get them in somehow. So very similar to the residential use case, this is driving dwelling counts, but it's not graphically creating the dwellings. This is also driving dwelling counts, but it is graphically showing you what the dwellings are. So there's those two methodologies. One's a bit more high fidelity and one's a bit low fidelity.
Perfect. We've also got one more question from Sammy. She's asking, can you make an E-shaped residential? In other words, can the intersection between the two open lines heal?
Yes.
I think you've got that one in the content library as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, we do we? Right. So this is good. So the content library, also, I would say any requests for content, please flick them through.
Try
Imperial.
Try wrap. Yeah.
Wrap. Let's try it. Let's try wrap. One thing to notice when you import content from the content library is it comes with usages and flows and geometry. And so it can override. If you set usages up in your project, you just have to be real careful around how you do that. So sorry. It's not healing ideally over here, but it can heal. You can see it is healing a little bit. Let me show it from first principles. So if I click on this apartment and we go into the flow editor, you can see what's happening over there is that there's a feature, which is the line, which is going into the apartment block, and out it comes. So what we can do is input another, and sorry, with one line, we can create a C. And I will say, as I do this, this is under active development. Like we know this is it's surprisingly difficult to get these algorithms working. I'm going to put it here, and I'm just going to clean up my screen by turning off the buildings. So we've got a C, and what we want is an E. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that line and feed it to this algorithm. And so when I come to the flow editor, I add an input parameter, and I want another feature. So a line is a feature. Call it E, and you can see it goes to the flow inputs there. And so now I'll pick that line and do this. There you go. Okay, so now what's happened is that has healed across. That E has healed across. Now, and it'll try and heal as best it can across these nodes. And you can see it does get a little bit thingy. So just make sure that you bring the line close. Something that is tricky is selecting geometries that are referenced by a flow. So because if I hover here, I'm hovering over the geometry that is produced by this apartment flow that's attached to this geometry. And so Giraffe will select kind of the root parent. And so if you're wanting to get that E, I find you have to just use Shift and box select it. But that's a heals E. I believe we can even do a 6. There we go. But this is under active development. I think Shift A to change depth. Oh, actually, it's working quite nicely. So yeah, you can get in there. You can change the mix. You can change the depth, and it will heal. But it's on the bleeding edge, I would say, of the state of the art. So have fun, and it's being worked on now. This is a big push for us for the next sprint.
And I think you've also answered the next question as well about solving for internal corners. And like by default, we try and assume a core will solve for a core in that location. But with Shift A, you've got manual control.
Drag these across. That's right. And it's just in terms of learning the parameters inside of Giraffe, like we've got all these balconies, etc. So you can see these balconies are now crashing into each other. And so we can align these balconies left or right, or we can just turn them off. So we don't get that. And when you're in Shift A mode, you can drag things across. So I know often in the States, they do internal corner apartments that look something like this. Like right? And then they position those wherever, where they need to go, but which we don't have the capacity for now. These are also not in Australia, they're very unusual, if possible at all. So again, that's something that we're working on now, is how to provide a greater degree of sort of internal corner logic solving. So actually, same for the external corners over there. So you can see we really only support like up to a rectangle. So if you wanted to sort of have two, it's a little difficult. I will show you something here, which I think is worth seeing. And this is using flow. So if you're doing apartment layouts and you have a kind of a methodology, whether that's an internal corner problem or an external corner or whatever it is, you can build bespoke flows. So this is a flow that I've built. I will put this one on the content library and sort of use at your own risk, but also, it is really cool. And all this is a pattern book of apartment types, which I've just grouped. So this one I've grouped it. I've called that group number 1. That's group number 2. That's group 1S. And this is group 1C. So it's a 1-bedroom with a core in it. And then I've got a flow that takes a custom text input, which is the apartment mix. And so I can go 1, 1, and I'll get 2 1-bedrooms. And then if I add a 1C, I'll get a 1C with the core. So there's that 1C with the core. And then I can do a 2, right? And then same thing on the other side. Now, what's so nice about that is I've got a type called you see this 2SP. So that's a 2 at the start for the S, and then the P is this peak. So if I change that 1 to a 2SP, I get that 2SP like hanging off the end of my corridor over there. And you can see this is a kind of a specific solution to a problem. It's not quite the internal corner problem, but it's the end cap problem. And similar types of solutions where you find the internal corners and then like sub in from a design library a solution, click, click, kind of like Lego, works really nicely. So another one here, you can see I've got a core block over there. And here, so I could replace I go 2, 1 core, 1 core, so I'll go 2, 1, and then I'll just go a core. And so now I've got a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, and a core. And that's how I'm servicing this building. And another nice thing I built into this flow was this recolor button. And all that does is it overrides the color property throughout the flow. So I can get like a monochromatic kind of a look. So that jumped very quickly to an advanced mode. But that problem of like dealing with special cases within a floor plan, right? Normally in apartments, because they're the trickiest, there's so many approaches that you can build up in Giraffe to deal with that kind of problem, and in active development.
I think we've got one other question here from Darylyn, just about can you create a multi-deck car park so it could include ramps? And I'm wondering, could you use an exclusion zone at multiple levels? Or
yeah, that probably what I would do exactly. Okay, so let me check this out. So we've got the multi-deck car parking, which is just car parking with multi-deck. And if I grab the flow editor and put in the car park, so I'm just building it up from first principles. So parking lot V2, there's the input. Parking lot V2 transform.
And this is probably something that we could add to the content library as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll sort of get there in a second. All right. So let's say that's our layout. So what you would do, I think that's right. So either the ramp is going to happen in this zone, as in often they're just like a spiral and it happens there. If there was an additional requirement for a ramp, I think Adam's right. What I would do is add an exclusion zone or probably a no parking zone and kill some of the car parks. So our solver doesn't solve the vertical automatically. Like, yeah, so there's on the market, there are those that do, but ours doesn't yet. That'll be a V3. So you'd have to sort of manually reason it out as to how to do it.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions. The only other thing, Rob, that I could think of was maybe the trim tool and the auto usage might be worth mentioning.
Oh, yes. All right. So auto usage is really cool. So you can see down here, there's an auto usage button. And so currently it's set to blank. So if I draw a rectangle, I just get a blank rectangle. However, if I say set this one to residential, and now I want to keep drawing residential, I can toggle to the auto usage and I can set to residential, or I could use Y. So let me say I want to keep drawing. I don't have my, let's say this. Now I'm toggled to car park, right? And so now every geometry I draw will be car park. And if I toggle to residential, every geometry I draw will be residential. So this is really useful if you are drawing a lot of the same thing, obviously, and you don't have to like keep going and grabbing the going and grabbing and changing the usage. And trim tool. Now this is not one that I use a lot, but it's select a line, and so I'll just do that again in slow-mo. So edit, trim, select the cutting line, and then the thing you want to cut to, and Giraffe will cut this back. Now again, we've made another version of this, which is more, I think, much more intuitive and flexible, which will release relatively soon. But that, yeah, have a go. This is useful, obviously, if you've got a boundary or a road or a strange geometry, or if you import a strange, a complex line and you want to trim to it, it's super useful to use that tool. And again, I would look at these menus, like they're really big. So if you've ever got an idle 5 minutes, just, see what's happening in here. There's often stuff that comes in because we're trying to, make the drawing experience as easy and pleasant as possible.
Perfect. We've only got 5 minutes left, Rob, but it might be also worth just touching on some of the new apps, I guess, or some of the noteworthy ones.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got IFC export. So for anyone in, BIM, what you do is you look for the IFC beta app, select the geometry of interest, and then sort of watch this processing bar coming through. And that'll come out and convert this geometry into an IFC model, which you'll be able to see. And if you open up inside of ArchiCAD or Celibri or Revit, something like that. Again, would love feedback on this. That's why we're calling it beta. It's coming out definitely as valid IFC, but there's obviously many ways of skinning that cat in terms of the slabs and the walls. But it's coming out per story with these geometries. The other ones that we've got, a pattern book. I think we may do that at a separate. That's a really cool app. I think the area app is also really powerful and nice. This is what it does is it counts up the area in a number of ways and can download it to go into Excel or into a state master. And so you can break down the areas by building, by level, by unit, in meters or feet. And you can include a whole bunch of options. So have a look at this. This is a really interesting app and some great instructions down there on how to use it.
We've also got a YouTube video that's just been published on that. So that runs you through. James Welsh sort of talks through that process. So feel free to check that one out.
Are there any other apps that should be called out?
GeoReference, did you?
Oh, GeoReference. This is another cracker. So the GeoReference app over here, what it does is it allows you to select an image and then position it accurately. So what I'll do is I'll take a screenshot of this and I'll save that screenshot to the desktop. And so then I'll upload it. Right, there it is. I'll make it large and I'll leave its name as is. And now instead of like pasting it in and then kind of like rotating and scaling it, what you do is you can crop the image. This works for PDF as well. And then you set points. So I'm going to set a point on that corner there, and that corner there, and on that corner there, and that corner there. So, and then why don't we do it like on that little thing there, and the shit in there. So this works really well if you've got like satellite imagery. So you find the power point or the edge of the power line or the edge of the building, and what you get is the image attached. So I didn't actually do a great reference because I put those 2 points too close to each other, but you can see what it has actually succeeded in hitting those 2 points. So the transformation to that image to minimize the distortion for those 3 points. So if I was trying to go a bit slower, I would have put a 4th point over here. So don't put 2 points right next to each other. Much better to put a point down there. And as I'm showing here, you can just click on the points and get them, and redo them and reset them. So that's really powerful and actually really convenient. And you can also add the number of points. So these I don't know what GC or ground control points. You can add the ground control points for increased accuracy. So you can just keep adding them.
Got one other. Can you use that tool with PDF? So yes, you can import a PDF or a PNG. Same method applies there. And then another question from Sammy: does it export KMZ files? So
does Giraffe export KMZ? We don't export KMZ. I think we should be able to add that. We export GeoJSON, which will go in a queue and then go in a KMZ very easily. So if you're after sort of geospatial formats, we export GeoJSON, and then so my normal workflow for geospatial land is GeoJSON into queue, and then queue goes in a shapefile KMZ, geo to all the rest of them. So QGIS, which is free, very robust, very fast, very simple, with tons and tons of very widely used. So that's the way to do it for any formats. But we'll have a look at adding KMZ because I think that's an open one, should be easy.
And then there's one more question about any updates for creating sheets for PDF export. So that's the report builder. So wasn't part of this release, but maybe it's something that we can just touch on.
Yes, we've got a relatively fully featured report builder here, which will load slowly, which is set up like this, and you can add pages and remove pages. You can also set the pages up, use templates, but what it has is access to the views. And so if you create a view, and the way you create a view is zoom in as you want, click on the Views tab, click Add New View, choose 2D or 3D, so we'll choose 2D, choose a scale, GPI, etc., and continue, and that generates this high res. I won't debug this live, but if you get the view and save it, so I'm not sure what's happening with the 2D view there. But then you can actually place those views on this page, and then that's going to export to PDF. So not only do you get the views, but you get analytics if there are any in the project, and you can add attachments, shapes, photos, elements, so you can sort of get in there and make something look okay quite quickly. And then, so you download PDF and it comes down.